Okay, so here we go. Welcome back to school 2024. Happy new school year. My name is Liliana Diaz-Pedros. I'm joined by Kim Madden and our ASL interpreter, Marley Crane. Welcome. So today we are going to be discussing some changes in, we're going to talk a little bit about IFC, but we're also going to be talking about some updates and the New York City schools account, transportation, placement issues, IEP issues, language access, and then some other information later on. Before we get started, some basic pieces that you should know about this webinar is that we're going to be taking questions almost exclusively during the recorded presentation through the Q&A. So please enter your questions. At the very end, if you have some live questions, we may have some time to answer those outside of the recording. We will provide copies of the slides. They will also be archived on our website at advocatesforchildren.org, where you will also have a copy or of a recording of this presentation. Okay, if that all sounds okay, we can get going. So for those of you who do not know Advocates for Children, we are an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We center exclusively around education issues in New York City and issues that affect New York City public school students. So if you are a New York City resident and you receive services from the New York City Department of Education, you can try to contact us through our helpline on Monday through Thursday, 10 through 4. You can also email us at info@advocatesforchildren.org. We will have that address at the very end in our last slide. You can also reach us through our website at advocatesforchildren.org to get guides and resources. We have a ton of resources and pretty much anything that you can think about the New York City public school system, from early childhood through transitioning into life after high school. We provide free workshops and trainings on demand, or as we're doing right now, public webinars on information that we feel is important to share to families. And we offer free legal services to income eligible families. Just giving a second for, you can check for updates on our website. We have, as mentioned, a ton of information. Our website is brand new. We just redid it. We're very proud of the way it looks. We hope it is easier to navigate. One of the pieces that I wanted to highlight today was this piece here about get help. You can always click on that link and find publications. Down in this link, you can find our back to school Q&A information, which is very easy to navigate, very easy to use, and we will update as well with information that becomes available later on after this webinar. Okay. You can also find our other recorded workshops on our website as well. So we will have this one, the Back to School 2024 Troubleshooting and Live Q&A. But we have others, from, like I said, from placement for students with IEPs is one of the most recent ones. We will have that in Spanish soon. But pretty much any issue that you can think about, you can look it up over here in topic, language, and date, and then go from there. But today, we're going to be talking about Back to School 2024, right? So the first thing that we wanted to highlight is a place where you can turn for a lot of information that is of particular relevance during this time. What is the New York City schools account? It is a parent portal. It is a place for you to find your child's grades and test scores, and also take classes in their parent university, access forms for your child, and also access other support information. It is different if you're familiar with the myschools.com account, which is for applications. This is really for you exclusively to find information about your child, which may include, of course, looking at applications, but it is not a place for applications. It is really just for your child. Now, if you do not have New York City schools account, you can easily get one by following the directions on the Department of Education's website. What the Department of Education wants to do is to verify your identity, so make sure that you are the parent of a child in a New York City public school. And so there are 3 different ways that you can create the account. First is by visiting your child's school. So you confirm that you are who you are and you get a temporary password. You can also do it via teleconference, and or you can get a letter with an account creation code. Okay. All right. Now, the New York City student account looks like this once you log in. And as you can see, you can have all your children in the same account. You can add your children to the same account. In this case, this is a family with 2 children. So students are student 1, student 2. And here you can click for important forms. Here you can click for parent university or for reporting bullying, etc. But where you really want to go is here to my student. Okay. And you can do this through your desktop, or now the Department of Education is encouraging use of their mobile app as more features are being added. And here we wanted to highlight a few things. Of course, you see the basic stuff, grades, assignments, and assessment. But you can get a copy of your child's IEP through this. So if you're wondering what the most recent IEP has been and what it says, it should be available right here. You can get information about enrollment. And very important, this is the one place where you're going to get information about your child's transportation to New York City Public Schools. All right, so let's talk about that. All right. So the Department of Education provides transportation to all eligible New York City students in public charter and non-public schools. You're eligible for busing if busing has been mandated on a child's IEP, if you're living in temporary housing, if the child is in foster care. And then finally, for students who are none of these, but if they're distance eligible and the school that they're going to attend provides yellow bus services. Not all schools provide yellow bus services, so this is something that you would need to check on at the appropriate time. Now, all students that are eligible for busing are also eligible for student Metro cards or Omni cards while they wait for busing. And additionally, if you're a parent of a student in temporary housing or in foster care, you're also eligible for an adult Metro card to bring your child to school, regardless of your child's age. You can ask your school's transportation coordinator for Metro cards. If the school doesn't offer yellow bus services and the service is not mandated on the IEP, and you are not a family who has a child in foster care or lives in temporary housing, Metro card or Omni card should instead be offered. Now, Metro cards are being phased out at this point, and you may be seeing that. Student Omni cards have been starting to be offered, and these are different from the regular Omni cards that you may use in the subway. A student Omni card provides 4 free trips with the respective bus transfers each day, including the weekend. So if you feel that your child may be eligible for the Omni card or the Metro card, please make sure to contact your school about it. Okay, so far so good. All right. Now, to check on transportation, if you think that your child is entitled to yellow bus.
Liliana, it's not, the screen isn't changing slides.
There it didn't change. Okay, sorry. Is it?
Yeah,
okay, looks like it is now. Thank you. All right. So to check on transportation, at least you should know that at least a week before school, which is around now, your child's bus company and route number should be available on the NYXA account, on the New York City Schools account. I always want to say New York City student account, but it's schools account, so I get tripped up over that. So if I say NYXA, please remember that's what I'm referring to as the parent portal. Okay. If there is no information on the NYXA account about transportation the week before school, call your school's transportation coordinator, who should then reach out to the OPT transportation liaison. And also you should know the bus company should call you with pickup times to make sure that you are on the same page about pickup. All right. If you have a child whose IEP mandates transportation, the transportation section in your child's IEP should include any of the your transportation needs, including whether it's a small bus or if a child requires special equipment, air conditioning, limited time travel, bus matron, etc. And then you should make sure that the IEP does indeed reflect all of your child's transportation needs. And then you should next check to make sure that NICSA has the same information that appears on your IEP. Then contact the bus company or wait until the bus company contacts you, whichever you prefer, to make sure that they can offer the services that are listed on your child's IEP. Now, if your child's IEP does not list all the services that your child needs, this is a good time to then contact your school-based support team to make the immediate changes so that they can receive the services on the bus. Okay. Now, depending on your child's medical condition, the Department of Education may require extra forms to be filled out by your doctor before before the IEP meeting. If that is the case, we can give you additional information as to how to go about doing that. Okay. All right. Now, if there is an problem with the bus, you can contact your child's school. Some of the issues might include you don't have the route information. It's already a week before school. You don't have contact information for the bus, which should appear on the NICSA account. It should appear. You should have bus information complete with route, bus company information, and phone number. If you don't have any of that information, or if you're missing some information, or the information is incorrect, contact your school first and ask them to file a complaint with OPT and to give you a complaint number. You can also contact OPT yourself and ask for a complaint number. And you really need to call each day that there is a problem and keep track of the complaint numbers. All right. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of transportation resources, and also that we will share this information with you when this presentation ends. One of the pieces of information that we really like is our fact sheet on arranging transportation. It really looks at troubleshooting, so things that can go wrong and how to resolve them. So I wanted to tell you some highlights. So if a student is eligible for busing based on their IEP or status as a person in temporary housing or as a person in foster care, they may be eligible for transportation reimbursement if their bus doesn't show up or if services become unavailable after the route start date. If you have to spend money on transportation, save your receipts. There is a way to request reimbursement. There is a form online. If a student is eligible for busing based again on their IEP or a student in temporary housing or foster care status, you can also be eligible for prepaid rideshare. If that is something that interests you, you can contact your school's transportation coordinator or your district's transportation liaison if there are problems such as, you have IEP mandated busing and you have not been routed after 10 school days. So these are real emergencies. So you're experiencing a lot of difficulty. If you don't remember any of this, do not worry. You can also contact us and we'll give you the information. All right. And I don't know if this started this year. Kim, you can tell me if this is new for this year, but we're really excited to see that
it started last year, but I don't think it was everywhere. And it was so popular for the people who did have it.
So now it's everywhere. That's my understanding, right? So now you can track your child's bus through the New York City bus app. The place where you can find the app and do your login is right on the bottom of the screen, right there. But I'm pretty sure you can do a quick search and find it. But we're very excited about this development. Wanted to share that with you. All right, let me take a minute to see if there are any questions. No, it's a pretty quiet bunch today. Feel free to enter your questions later if you think of something. Okay. All right. Let's go with some other issues. What if you have no placement? So it's the beginning of school is starting and you really don't know where your child is going to be going to school. Well, we have answers. So for students who need a school or have not done an application and you're in the grades K through 8, go to your zone school if you have one. And if you do not, go to your family welcome center and then discuss the needs of your child and where your preferences. And then if you're in high school, same idea, you go to your family welcome center and you can find the locations for your family welcome center online at this address, this link. Okay. All right. If you have no placement and you're in preschool, you can contact programs that you're interested in directly, or you can call the Office of Enrollment at the number that appears on the screen, or email esc.enrollment@schools.nyc.gov. You can find a list of programs with open seats at myschools.nyc.com. Now, the Committee on Preschool Special Education, or CPSE, will arrange for SEED, special education itinerant teachers and or related service providers to serve your child based on the recommendations on their IEP. But the CPSE does not arrange placement for children in general education classes, in early childhood, or in daycare settings. They only work on placement for students with IEPs that recommend special classes, which is a class where all students have disabilities, or a special class in an integrated setting, which is a class where some students have disabilities and others do not. If that is the case for you, contact the CPSE for the district where you live. Okay. Now, for even younger children, families who miss the 3K, pre-K, or kindergarten deadlines, they can add their child to wait lists using My Schools. And remembering these wait lists were closed on Friday, September 20th this year. So far, so good? All right. If you have no placement and you're in a kindergarten to 12th grade, in a district 1 to 32, which are non-specialized schools, what you know as your regular community schools, first you want to visit your zone schools or family welcome center. You can call the number that appears on the screen. And remembering that for kindergarten, middle school, and high school, placement is typically offered during the admissions process. If you did go through the admissions process, wait lists are still open for middle school and high school until September 13th. And again, for kindergarten until September 20th. If you applied through specialized programs, which are programs that accept students outside the regular admissions process, like bilingual programs for ASD Nest, Horizon, or AIM, or iRead, you can try to follow up and you may receive a placement notice at this time. If you have a child who is in District 75 and at this point you don't have placement in District 75, is a district that manages all self-contained classrooms and self-contained schools, so mandated specialized placements in smaller schools. You may receive a prior written notice, a PWN, or a school location letter, or you should have received one, telling you of a proposed placement that could implement the IEP that was created for your child. If you did not receive a prior written notice or a school location letter that recommends a placement for your child, you can email District 75, D75 placement at schools.nyc.gov, or you can contact them through the number that appears on the screen and ask for District 75 placement. Okay. Now, if you have a child with an IEP, please make sure that your school can provide the program and services that are listed on your child's IEP. We do not recommend that you change your child's IEP to fit what the schools offer, unless you really believe that this is what's right for your child. And I think I'm going to stop in a second to see if there are any questions about any of this at this point. And it doesn't seem to be the case. And at this point, I'm going to transfer this part of the presentation to the wonderful Kim Madden. Kim, you are on.
Okay.
Thank you all for listening.
Great, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about IEP issues, students who are multilingual learners, students in temporary housing, and some other issues to wrap this up. So I think there's two main IEP issues. The IEP isn't right, and the IEP isn't being implemented. So we're going to start with the IEP isn't right. In other words, your child needs different supports than what's on the IEP. If anyone's joining us and is new to the world of special education, we have more recorded webinars in more detail about what an IEP is and evaluations. This is a very quick overview. Okay, next slide, Liliana. So how to change an IEP. If you feel like your child's IEP doesn't reflect what they need, the first thing to do is to get proof. What supports the fact that the IEP needs to change, gathering all records and giving it to the school. Sometimes parents have private evaluations or school evaluations, or they might need new evaluations. Whatever it is, it could also just be based on what you've seen at home over the summer or in their summer program. And you want to ask for an IEP meeting in writing and be as specific as you can about what you think your child needs and why. At the meeting, if you have anyone in particular you can bring to support you, related service provider or one of your child's doctors or therapists, you want to also take notes and ask for the program pages to be printed out at the end so you can be clear as to what was recommended. And finally, you want to get a copy of the finalized IEP. And if you need to go up the chain, you should do that. We do have whole other trainings on it, so we're not going to get into depth about how to challenge an IEP or do a due process hearing. There's lots of resources and webinars on our website. I'd encourage you to look there. Okay, next slide. Also, sometimes people are realizing that what is available in their child's school may not work for them. And we always want to take an opportunity to remind people of some of the more creative programs that the DOE has that are in District 1 through 32 schools, but also can offer more specialized services. They're called specialized programs. There's a few different kinds. Some of them are about disability, some of them are about language. The first one, if your child has a disability, but is also bilingual, they may need a bilingual ICT or special class. Because there's so few of those and they're not at every school, that placement for those is done centrally. I think many people have heard of ASD programs and those keep expanding, which is great. There's ASD Nest programs, which are basically integrated classes, but with a special expertise in autism. And then ASD Horizon classes, which are self-contained classes, all small classes of students with autism. There's ACEs programs for students with intellectual disabilities. There's also barrier-free schools, and this, of course, could be across the continuum, but for students who can't, who need accommodations, they can't do stairs, so they're going to need a ramp or an elevator to get in to access places. Also, we have seen cases where parents need this, and although they may not have a right, I think the DOE does try to work with people to make that happen. There's also some newer programs for literacy, iRead and dyslexic programs. And for more specialized programs, because these do keep changing, I'd encourage you to look on the DOE website. And on that section of the website, there's a lot of different ways in which to contact them about different programs. Okay, there's also state-approved non-public schools. These are appropriate for students if their needs can't be met in a public school program. The schools specialize in meeting particular needs. To get that, your IEP needs to say defer to CBST or NYSED approved non-public day program. You obviously also can get this by going through an impartial hearing, and that's for either approved or non-approved schools. For approved schools, there's a branch of the DOE called the CBST, or the Central Base Support Team. And that's the office that if it's determined that your child needs a non-public school, applies to non-public schools. I will say at Advocates for Children, we've often seen parents find a better fit for their child if they're able to apply on their own, because they know their child and, you know, they're very motivated to find a program they think would work for them. For a list of schools, you can go to this website here, and it's the State Education Department's website. It is a little bit trickier to navigate than it was in the past. It pulls up an Excel sheet, but you can, you know, click around on there and sort it by type of disability and region and things like that. Okay, next. And so the other thing that comes up a lot is your IEP is right, but the school doesn't have what's on it. Next slide. So one question that comes up is, how do you know if your child is getting what's on their IEP? The most obvious, and I think sometimes, hopefully everybody would think of this, but you should always ask the school, ask the teacher, ask the principal, ask when you're applying. Do you have the ability to provide what's on the IEP? You can, sometimes schools give a kind of a cagey answer, like, well, we always meet all students' needs. And, you know, or they're saying something that's giving you pause, because all schools are supposed to be able to meet the needs of all students. But the reality is that's not always the case. So then you can do some research into what the school has. And although all schools are supposed to provide programs and services on IEPs, you don't have a right to an individual school. So that can get a little tricky. Sometimes you really want a school, but they don't have what's on the IEP. Sometimes you really want a program and the school doesn't have it, but they want to try to change your IEP to what they have. That's only a good idea if you really agree that that's going to work for your child. The IEP should be based on what your child needs, not on what a school has. And the other thing that's true is an IEP and program and services should be in place from the beginning of the school year. And this is where we have seen, you know, problems at times because schools don't have it and say, well, let's consider your IEP after you've been here for a month. They're really supposed to be implementing the IEP on day one. Okay, next slide. So one way to tell ahead of time, and I think we keep talking about NICSA throughout this, and I think I know there's a lot of professionals on here, as much as possible, I would work with the families you serve to try to help them get NICSA access. If it's somebody who you're working with closely, there is a way for you to get access, for them to share access with you. But it does seem like this is the way the DOE is moving. I mean, it's the way the world is moving too. And it's hard for a lot of the parents that Advocates for Children serves. And I'm sure this is something that is true for many families and professionals as well. But, you know, you need a computer and you need internet access and you need a certain amount of digital literacy. But for better or worse, many things are showing up on NICSA. And one of the things that, this is a few years old now, is you can see who your child's teachers and therapists are in NICSA. I'm never too clear on the exact date when this gets updated. If you look right now, it might not be in there. But if you click on IEP, it should show you who the teachers and SETS teachers and therapists are. And if you don't see a name under provider name, or, you know, there's something that's wrong about that, it's a person who's a general education teacher and your child's supposed to be getting special education services, that's at least a place that you can see, well, this is a problem. So this is certainly a page to check out. And I do think as the DOE moves to a different computer system away from CSIS, and I think that's probably a few years away still, but when they do that, they're going to have even more in NICSA. So it's a good system to get used to. Okay, so you can look there. Another place you can look, which is not about an individual student, but is on data on the DOE website, is class size reports. These are some of my most favorite reports on the DOE website. They're not perfect. You can't see if a small class is a 12-to-1 or a 12-to-1-to-1. You can't see teachers' names, for example, but you can see, okay, if this school has how many ICT classes, has how many self-contained classes, has how many gen ed classes, and how many students are in each school. in each program at a school. It's not real time, so it's updated a few times throughout the year, but it does give you a sense. If a school has never had a small class, you can see that in the class size reports by year, and you can see going back, this is something they haven't ever had. I will say, speaking of digital literacy and needing a computer, these are huge Excel sheets. So you open it up and it's elementary school and middle school, and then high school and another tab on the bottom. You have to be okay with sorting with Control F to find things. But if all of that works for you, they really are good ways to find out what kinds of programs does a school, had they had in the past. Okay, next slide. Finally, this is somewhat useful, although it's always outdated. If you go to the school quality reports on the DOE's website, like look up, this was for iSchool, the New York City high school, they're actually doing better than they were the last time I did this presentation, but they still have a long way to go. You can see that only in the 22-23 school year, only 46% of students receive the recommended program on their IEP. That's pretty low. So that would certainly give me pause if I had a student who had an ICT or a small class and they were at the iSchool. High schools in general have a harder time complying with special classes and ICTs on students' IEPs. But even for high schools, this is an example of a school that has some improvement to do. The problem is it's 22-23. Hopefully in 23-24, this was a higher number, but we won't find out until way later in the school year. So this is really more just to give you a bit of a historical sense as to what's happened at a school. And to find these reports, you go on School Quality Report. And if you look on the top, it's supportive environment, which I don't know, I don't find it that obvious that that's where I should look for students with IEPs, but that's where you look for this data. You can also see what percentage of students with IEPs receive their recommended related services. Keep in mind, this is a pretty, it's a very broad strokes number. It means students received 1 week of service at any time during the school year. It's not an ongoing number. So you would expect this to be high. And in fact, 90% is still a little bit low, meaning there's still 10% of the students that didn't get anything all year. Okay, next slide. So let's say you find out, okay, they don't have my special class, or they're not giving me the related services on my IEP. What are your rights as a parent? There are some makeup services or vouchers that are available. I think one of the most well-known ones is RSAs. Those are for related services. To use that, you have to find a provider who's licensed with New York State. You should be able to ask for an increased rate, although we've certainly had people have a lot more trouble with that. If you do find a provider for an RSA and they need an increased rate, please contact Advocates for Children and let me know, and we can see if we can help. But sometimes people are able to find someone who can take an RSA and they can provide services either outside or inside school. P3s and P4s are the same as RSAs, but they're for sets. And the same thing, you can ask for an increased rate. For these, I think the DOE is more likely to agree to an increased rate up to a point. They seem to have picked a number of 125 that they will not go above. You could still file a hearing, but that has gotten a lot trickier. And finally, if you don't have the small class, your child has a small class and the DOE has not provided it by a certain deadline, you do have a right to something called a P1. It's also called a Nickerson letter. And that means that you could ask to have your child enrolled at an approved non-public school. Your child has to be accepted at that non-public school. You have to find the non-public school, and they have to be able to serve your child's classification and provide the program roughly that's on the IEP. All of these have expiration dates, particularly the P1. You still have a right to the services, but for the vouchers, you can't just use them, a year later, or with some of them even a month later. So make sure you're reading the kind of dense text on them very carefully. Okay, and if that doesn't work or that doesn't work for you, a lot of times people are trying to work out things at schools. The first place to start, of course, is just informally. You want to start with the school, speak with the parent coordinator, speak with the principal. If you have a good relationship with somebody at a school, I would always ask them and say, hey, my child's not getting related services regularly, or I have a problem with this teacher and I want to switch classes. How do you think I should handle this? It always makes sense to talk to your allies at a school and figure out what they've seen. But first try at the school level. If that doesn't work, you can go to the superintendent's office, to the family support coordinator or the district family advocate. And finally, if none of those things work, but you still want to try to resolve this in a less formal way, you can contact the special education office at this number or this email. Okay. And there are some like more specialized emails centrally for specific issues. So there's a related services email. Actually, I don't know if they've changed this. They are no longer calling transition to kindergarten turning 5. It's now called the kindergarten IEP process. So I'm looking at this slide and wondering, I presume this email will still work, turning 5 at schools.nyc.gov, but there may be an updated one as well. You can always check on the DOE's website. Special ed at charter schools, and issues do come up there frequently. You would contact the CSE chairperson. And for specialized programs, those are all the ones that are outside the application process, the ASD Nest programs, the bilingual special ed, et cetera. You want to write to specialized programs at schools.nyc.gov. And of course, always feel free to call AFC's helpline. We're open Monday to Thursday from 10 to 4. And you can also write in through our website. Finally, if none of that works and you need to do something more formal, you can go to mediation. That's a voluntary meeting. So both sides have to agree. A mediator leads it. And you're not waiving your right to go to an impartial hearing. This can be a really good idea if you want your child to stay at a school, if something has gotten heated and you think talking it through can help. Mediators are trained to try to listen to both sides and get both sides to listen to each other. So sometimes that can work. Sometimes it can't when it's not even in the school's control. For example, I saw a parent who once went to mediation for an earlier bus route, a later bus route time. That the school totally agreed with the parent. They were not OPT, so they didn't have a way to make that happen. It doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to escalate that without going to hearing. It just wasn't the right route for that parent. Impartial hearings, as you may have heard, get used a lot in New York City. They're legal proceedings. There's an impartial hearing officer, or now it's an oath officer, who's in charge. They issue a written decision and you can appeal. These are pretty formal procedures, although we do talk to parents who do them on their own all the time. It is always advisable, if you can, to have a lawyer go with you. And finally, you can write to the state education complaint. So we can, so they can investigate and they can order the DOE to do makeup services, for example. But this is kind of like filing a complaint with the Attorney General. You don't necessarily have the right, you're not in control. You can't say, I want this to make up for the fact that they violated my rights. The state education department could say they violated your rights and we think they're going to have to give you something that's different than what you think would resolve it. But it can be a good way to go for something, especially something systemic or something very straightforward. There's only one teacher in your ICT or something like that. And Maggie Moroff, my colleague, did just put in the chat. It is still, that turning 5 email is still working, but there's also a kindergarten application email as well. So wait, let me just see if I can find it. Kindergarten IEP process, so 2 P's, at schools.nyc.gov. We will update these slides before we send them out. So thank you, Maggie. Okay, next slide, Liliana. Okay, any questions? I don't think there's anything in the
There are
chat.
no open questions right now.
Okay.
But as I said, we just shared in the chat, we shared the new email address for the IEP process for kindergarten, but we will update the slides. I think you can go on to the next.
Okay. Okay, so for language access rights, for parents that don't speak English, they do have a right to get documents translated, including report cards and IEPs. And they have a right to interpretation services, meaning an actual interpreter, not just bring your older child or we'll grab somebody in the hallway. They have a right to interpretation services at school meetings and events in all the main languages of the DOE. All the main languages in New York City, sorry. And problems with translation or interpretation, you can email hello@schools.nyc.gov or call the DOE complaint line. I think for many of the professionals on here, it's your experience probably mirrors Advocates for Children, where this was a huge issue last year and will continue to be an issue, where especially a lot of newly arriving families are being given misinformation or not provided with information in their language. So it's certainly very important to make sure parents know they have a right to this. And program options for ELSE, we have trainings and resources that go way into this. So this is a very quick overview. I'm sorry, ELSE is English Language Learner. Also, you'll see Multilingual Learner, which I think is the acronym they're using more. But it basically means a student who's still learning English and speaks another language. And there's different tests that they use to see how proficient are you in English and how much help do you need. But assuming you need help, you can be in English as a New Language, ENL, Transitional Bilingual Education, TBE, where they're phasing out your native language, and then dual language, where it's the whole class is taught in both languages. And this is quite popular for English-speaking children as well, so that they can learn another language. Okay. Multilingual learners with IEPs, but I think I mentioned this earlier, but unfortunately bilingual special education classes are really limited, even though you legally have a right to get them. Getting that enforced is hard. You have a right to, they often give somebody an alternate placement para. That means somebody to sit with a child in class and basically be their own personal interpreter, or they'll do sets. And none of these are ideal, but they're better than nothing. And it's something that if you're working with a family or you yourself have this issue, please reach out to Advocates for Children if you're not able to resolve it. You also can email the DOE at Bilingual Special Education Programs. It's BSE programs at schools.nyc.gov. And also for older students who are newly arrived, they have a right to transfer schools for ELS. International high schools, we see far too frequently students not being placed in international high schools when they might be a great fit. And finally, if they have some credits from the country they came from, they do have a right to try to have those credits transferred over so they're not starting at zero. We've definitely seen an uptick in the number of unaccompanied older youth that are coming here that need these programs. And on the bottom here, there's a link that goes to the list of bilingual programs. So certainly I would encourage anybody that is in this situation or is working with a family who is, to try reaching out to Central DOE. I think there's a lot of misinformation on an individual school level. And if it doesn't work, to reach out to Advocates for Children. And students in temporary housing, this actually overlaps a lot since a lot of the newly arrived immigrants are also in temporary housing. We did want to put a slide in here. This is a very quick overview. McKinney-Vento rights, which are the rights that apply, the federal rights that apply to students in temporary housing, are pretty broad. So we have a lot of materials on that. But one thing to know is that students who are in temporary housing, and temporary housing is a term of art, it doesn't just mean in a shelter, it can mean doubled up. or other type of circumstances where people might not immediately think, oh, you're in temporary housing, you have a right to continued enrollment. Or, if you want to stay at the school you're going to right now, even if you move to a different place, different place in the city, you also have a right to immediate enrollment where you move to. You have a right to transportation, and that's obviously important. If you move to a different area of the city, you need to get transportation back to the school if that's where you want to stay. You have a right to Title I services. So those are extra support services for students in temporary housing. And there should be a students in temporary housing school-based liaison, and there's students in temporary housing staff to help schools and families who are in temporary housing access all these resources. If you need help, we have a project at Advocates for Children that focuses specifically on students in temporary housing. It's our Project Lit, and the email and the phone number are there. And there's also a link to the regional managers at the DOE and students in temporary housing. And finally, hopefully this is something that no one ever anticipates happening. And then when you need the information, you need it right away. So if anyone finds themselves in the situation where your child is suspended, some very quick things to keep in mind. Your child can't be suspended unless there's a notice in writing. They can't tell your child to just go home without offering any kind of school. Principal suspensions, your main right is to ask for a conference. And for superintendent suspensions, you have a right to get a packet. It's a packet of information with witness statements and descriptions of what happened. If you're in this situation, please check our website and call us for help. There's very quick timelines that come up in this. So it's important to reach out if you find yourself in this situation. Okay. And finally, please take our survey. You can either click on, I guess you can't click on this link, but you could do it, the QR code, and we also will send this around. We'd encourage you to take our survey. We really do read every response, especially about what you're looking for, what worked, what you wanted more information on. And if you need more information, you can call our helpline at 866-427-6033. It's Monday to Thursday, 10 to 4. And you can also email us, or there's a form on our website. And that's actually maybe a little bit easier to use, where you can just fill in with your questions. Okay. Liliana, do you have any polls at the end you want to launch? And
I
don't know if we
do,
have
but
any
I'm going
questions.
to thank everyone who has been listening through a recording, and pause the recording at this point so we can take live questions. There are no Q&A questions at this point that have been unanswered. So thank you if you're listening after the fact. We do appreciate your taking the time, and please feel free to reach out to us whenever you need to.